So there was no Facebook. There was no, hey, let me just roll out some TikTok videos and we're going to go sell some product here. But and it was brand new and it required science. So we went to the equipment guys first. Unfortunately, they couldn't really explain why a guy would need it because, well, what are you talking about? We've never done that. Dad didn't do it. Grandpa didn't do it. Why would I do that? So, well, okay, we'll turn to the veterinarians, right? They can explain the science. Well, I would say this, for anybody out there looking at trying to develop a product, you develop your list of pros and cons and you try to be honest about, well, these are the cons, but in reality, you've already convinced yourself this is the next sliced bread. There's no way this could fail.
Sure.
I completely underestimated, I assumed every other veterinarian colleague of mine would also say, oh, yes, that's brilliant. Why haven't we been doing that? They did not say that. They also said, well, you voodoo, whatever. Why would we do that? We've never done it, right? And it took 10 years to convince the veterinary community. So you just don't know what kind of hurdles you'll run into.
Thanks for joining the Missing F podcast, where we're discovering what's missing in manufacturing and B2B marketing. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Richard Dumm. Dr. Rick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks.
So, Dr. Rick, you have an extensive background in launching companies in the animal health and agricultural field. You're a veterinarian. Maybe give us a little bit of a background about your experience and how you came from the lowly hills of Pennsylvania to where you are today.
Well, that was not an easy escape route, I can tell you. Once you're a Pennsylvanian, you're always a Pennsylvanian. So I grew up back there in the hills around the Johnstown, Indiana area, and frankly loved it and enjoy going back all the time.
Sure.
But it was other challenges were beckoning, as they say. So went to Florida for college and managed to make it through vet school down there at the University of Florida. So give the Gators a few bucks back in the day when they had a good football team. But it's been great. I've practiced as a predominantly large animal dairy veterinarian for the last 30 years. So it's been a fantastic career, and as we'll jump in here and talk a little bit about, but lots of interesting challenges and opportunities that those little three letters at the end of, when you have the name Dumm, you got to put doctor in front of it, right? Or you can't leave your hometown. So that's how it goes.
That's so great. I love that. Well, Dr. Rick, one of the things that I've found fascinating about your career is there are a lot of medical practitioners, whether it's MDs or veterinarians that practice all of their lives and do just that. They practice, they have patients, they build their own local practice and are very successful and fulfilled in that. You not only did that, you found ways to invent or innovate and then not only come up with those ideas, but then take those ideas to market in building companies. Could you maybe talk about, kind of those two sides of your career, that of a practicing veterinarian, but then also an entrepreneur and a business owner who took, found problems, which we all find problems, but then you correspondingly developed some solutions, right? And then not only found those solutions, but then we're able to scale those, take those to market, and that whole approach. Could you maybe walk us through some of those?
Sure. It's, as you mentioned, we all get exposed to issues or weaknesses in whatever our chosen field is. And I think part of it is I grew up again, back there where everybody just worked hard, right?
Sure.
And so and I think we were good problem solvers, maybe, and that's probably also growing up on a farm and in the timber business and everything else, right? And back in the day, when there wasn't always a technical solution for everything,
Sure.
so you just kind of plowed through with hard work. But what I started to notice in my career as a dairy practitioner was there were a lot of things that were gobbling up our time every day, and also gobbling up, draining the energy from people, and as a caregiver, I'm often charged with working with the herdsmen or the calf raisers or whatever on these dairies. And, that's not easy when animals are sick all the time.
No.
It's hard enough to just get through the day-to-day things that need to be done, the feeding and the milking and the bedding and the manure handling and, and forget about all the office things that have
Sure.
to happen to make it happen. So, that I think I just have a frame of mind for that. And so, and I love to invent, and I love to go home and figure out what is the solution. And, so I think the two go hand in hand. But I think that you either have that in you or not to say, I think I can solve that problem, right? And now maybe it takes a whole other set of blind skills or ignorant bliss or something to think I can now take this idea. Now I can take my solution and go market it. That's a whole other ball of wax.
What I think when you look at some of the things you said there, so I own a farm, and there's never a worse call from the farm other than like, oh, the calf barn, there's a problem. Right. And it's in like, oh, there's 20 calves right now on bottle, and 7 of them are sick all of a sudden. You have a problem, and the emotional toil that causes, on top of, like you said, all of the work that goes into the agricultural community to make things work. That it's rough. I know you did some innovating in that space, and certainly came up with some solutions with pasteurization of calf milk that changed the industry, certainly. And then not only did you come up with that situation, you guys took that to market, and really grew that business. Could you talk a little bit about that calf pasteurization and that process and the company, and just maybe a snapshot of that life cycle of that company?
Yeah, you bet. It was exactly that. You get the phone call of, and it happened to be a dairy, probably one of the top Jersey herds in the country.
Oh wow!
I mean, the two owners were both so into genetics, and it was just an amazing group of cows that milked. Even volume wise, they milked as well as Holsteins. It was unbelievable. They were big, beautiful cattle. And, hey, we've got calves dying. That's not a herd that you can just, I don't know. Let's throw this antibiotic at them or that one. So anyway, long story short, when you test for everything, you find everything on a dairy. And so,
Sure.
right, well, that didn't do us any good. Yeah, we know there's salmonella. Okay, is that the problem? We know so you run down through the whole list, and I don't even know what the aha moment that I had. It's been long enough ago that maybe I forget it, but we just suddenly asked, well, could we be feeding the problem? Are we doing this? And why don't we pasteurize the milk that we feed these calves? We pasteurize the milk before we drink it.
Sure.
And so that was the moment, right? And nobody, of course, was doing that back then. This is in 1999, and that there was nobody pasteurizing. I found a little bit of research. Some guys had looked at it out of UC Davis, but to my knowledge, it was never on a farm. So anyway, said, how hard can that be?
Sure.
We'll just heat up milk, right? It's 25 years later, we're still learning how to heat up milk. So, but it was amazing. Within a week of, I built this a contraption is literally what it was. It looked like a whiskey still, right? We told the milkers, look, when this big red light comes on, run over there quick and open this valve and close that valve. But within a week, we had literally turned things around on this farm to the point where, and it was such a drastic transition that I realized, okay, this is something I can do to help all of my clients.
Sure.
Maybe more than my clients, right? I wasn't quite thinking, oh, we'll sell this in 35 countries. It was, what can I do within my practice and make myself more useful than giving shots? And so, that's really the company in a nutshell. And 10 years later, we started looking at colostrum.
Sure.
And realizing, hey, this is another big weak spot, and we have the same pathogens in there. How can we carefully pasteurize that and protect it? And, that required a lot of research, a lot of cooperating with universities all around the country to, make sure we're doing things right. And, it is nice, again, with my degree, I have access to all these people, they'll actually take my call, and the first one anyways. But then we go from there, and we built it up, and it's been fantastic. So over the years, we've fed somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 million calves.
Wow.
And have literally had an impact on an industry. So it's been fantastic.
Well, no, that's wonderful. And congratulations on your success there. And thank you to someone who enjoys dairy products and has a dairy farm. Thank you for your innovation in that space, because one of the other points, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because this isn't really your and my level of expertise, but there are so few people growing up on the farm anymore. And there are so few people that actually know where their food comes from and how hard it is to raise these animals, to raise these crops, to feed the world, and how much actually goes into it. So that's such an important piece of our economy and the world ecosystem, or whatever you want to call it. But no, that's so important in those type of innovations, and to take an invention and an innovation and then make a worldwide impact. I mean, that everybody has that dream in their career when they're starting out. So that's amazing that you accomplished that. One of the things that's interesting when you think about entrepreneurship and marketing and innovating and growing a product is you have to think about what the market is for that product or service. And certainly in the agricultural space, in the animal health space, there is such a limited niche market for anything that we do. And also it appears to be growing smaller and smaller every day. Can you maybe talk about some of the challenges, maybe not so much with that product, because obviously at 35 countries, 35 million calves, like you found something that hit the rocket ship and took off, right? But when you've thought of other inventions and those type of things where you've seen that challenge of marketability in the animal health especially at scale, like what are some of the challenges that you've assessed or seen when you've tried to market ideas?
My wife is a CPA and was our CFO, and I don't believe rocket ship has ever been a word that she's used to describe our business.
Fair.
This is going to be awesome in 25 years. So, anyway, no, it's absolutely a consideration. And again, when you're, I had the fortunate case of being ignorant to just not realize how challenging it was going to be. So you're in a industry, specifically the dairy industry, right? Of even at that time, right, in the 19s and early 2000s, we had, I don't know, 55,000 dairies, maybe 60,000 dairies in the U.S. Now, fast forward 25 years, we're down I would be surprised if there's 35,000 viable dairies, right? There may be
Sure.
a few more with a milk cow or two, but so yeah, and you compare that to, so even if, think about that, I have a product and I think I can make $100 profit every time I go sell it. If you sold to every one of those, which would take a long time to nurture and build up, I mean, it's a $3.5 million absolute glass ceiling for you, right? So it's only going to cost you $4 million to do it. So you should be good, but it's tough. You compare that to, a household product and, where you may have access to 132 million households in the United States. It's a big challenge. So you absolutely have to take that into consideration. And then, when you compare those two ratios, right, of this is a little tiny number of dairies and then this is the number of households, and how am I even going to go talk to those people? They're so spread out across an enormous country, right? Any company of any size will tell you, they need, I don't know, minimum 15, 20 salespeople to try to cover the United States. Well, how do you pay those people? And how are you going to go touch these dairies and actually be part of their story or get into that inner circle and try to convince them to buy something? So all of these things come into play here. And, even in the much broader beef sector where you have, 750,000 now, that's a huge number compared to dairies.
Sure.
But first of all, these guys don't even want you on their property. A lot of them.
Yep.
And the same thing, they're so spread out. How do you go talk to them, and how do you find them and make them aware of a product that you have? And especially if it's a new novel product, it's a big challenge. But you can even take it back a step further, that how do I even find funding? Because now not only is it a small niche market, but now you have a very small group of investors who can understand what you're doing and want to invest in it. That's a big problem. You either have a whole lot of wealthy friends and family. I'll repeat where I grew up. I did not have that. And, that's tough, right? Or you have to have enough wealth of your own to get a bank to back you up, or you have to really learn to be a great salesman right out of the gate to go sell an idea before it's even a product, so you can get investors. And most of us, most entrepreneurs are not great salesmen. They're so that's tough. How do I go find funding? And in our world, then it makes me nervous of entrepreneurs that are really good salesmen.
Yeah.
That's the Theranos of the world, right? They actually did not have that.
Yeah. They were really good at the sizzle when there was no steak, right?
Exactly.
Whenever you guys were taking that company to market and growing, and you were really pushing the pasteurization methods for cattle, what did you find was the most successful marketing techniques with all of those challenges you listed? Like, was there something that stuck out that worked really well, or something that failed miserably that you could talk about? Because we end up getting, I think, more than our fair share of inquiries from animal health and or agricultural companies for marketing, if for no other reason than our background with John Deere, our background in agriculture, because there are very few marketing companies that actually understand the ag world. Kids aren't on the farm. I mean, they're really good at Facebook and these younger people that are probably way better than me at clicking on things and understanding the algorithms and stuff, but they have no idea which end of the cow you feed and which end the other stuff comes out of. So what do you see that has worked really well in the animal health space for getting those touch points, nurturing those audiences, and getting adoption, or at least maybe recognition of the authority of a product?
Well, it's tough. And, I'm looking back now at a spectrum of 25, 30 years here, but, like for my company, for the dairy tech products, that was brand new and it was science. And, we tried going to the market and this is in the day, right? This is before social media.
Sure.
Right. I mean, when I first started practicing, I was still stopping and putting quarters in to call back to answer when my beeper went off. Right. And I know I look young and spry, but
Sure.
that was,
I love it.
it was, that was the day. Right. So there was no Facebook. There was no, hey, let me just roll out some TikTok videos and we're going to go sell some product here. But so, and it was brand new and it required science. So, but we went to the equipment guys first. And, back then, and they still do, but these guys were the only ones that had route trucks driving all over the country and they're fixing equipment and they're visiting dairies and they were happy to take on a product. Unfortunately, they couldn't really explain why a guy would need it because, well, what are you talking about? We've never done that. Dad didn't do it. Grandpa didn't do it. Why would I do that? So, well, okay, we'll turn to the veterinarians, right? They can explain the science. Well, I would say this, for anybody out there looking at trying to develop a product, you develop your list of pros and cons and you try to be honest about, well, these are the cons, but in reality, you've already convinced yourself this is the next sliced bread. There's no way this could fail.
Sure.
Well, I completely underestimated the fact that, I assumed every other veterinarian colleague of mine would also say, oh, yes, that's brilliant. Why haven't we been doing that? They did not say that. They also said, well, you voodoo, whatever. Why would we do that? We've never done that, right? And it took 10 years to convince the veterinary community. So you just don't know what kind of hurdles you'll run into. But the veterinarians ultimately helped us grow the company. These guys, once we could prove it to them, and there was science behind it, now they helped us get onto their farms. But then that plateaus because they're not salesmen.
Sure.
They can show up at their dairy and they can say, you got a calf problem. This will help. But they're not going to go find you another client that they don't work for.
Sure.
So we plateaued. But by then, now you have some market saturation and you have more and more stories out there in the literature. So now we could move into distribution and then resume our climb with our business because it's a product that can be distributed now versus you have to educate about it all first. So that's been the difference. But I still think those things are important. Having some research behind you or having the relationships with the universities, having people write stories about what you're doing and how it's working and how it's been successful. Right. And, that it's not cheap. Even, look at our publications in the dairy industry, right? Horde's Dairyman, it's $10,000 or $12,000 to put an ad in there. You can go through your budget pretty quick. And you better be good at writing ad content. So, we're fortunate now to have social media as an opportunity. And now with our new products and projects that we're working on through Data Ag and even still with Dairy Tech, that's more of our focus of how do we go communicate with these folks, because we're into that generation now where those are also the people running the farms and they're paying attention to that stuff. So.
Well, no, I think that's right on. I mean, and it shocks me what's still missing in a lot of animal health and agricultural marketing is social media. And companies are not leveraging that tool. They're not leveraging video. They're not developing content that makes sense for the market, because you just described, I think, what's very classic in this hyper niche market. You have multiple stakeholders. You were going through distribution, so you had to educate your distributors. You then had to educate your end users, and you were doing that kind of via proxy with the veterinarian community. So there's a lot of different like minds on that quote unquote buyers committee, or those stakeholders that you're trying to educate and bring along. And back in the day, back in the payphone day, right? That was a lot of hard work. It's still hard work, but you can do that work once and then scale it through video, through social media, through case studies, through those type of applications, and then rinse and repeat, and continue to have those touch points over time through social media, through YouTube, even TikTok, or wherever the channel may be. Right. So I think that's an interesting take. And I think that takes us really into our next topic, because not only did you see your career impact the dairy community, and which is more of a B2B space, right? Very niche audience, very defined total addressable market, and probably revenue potential that you approached with that slow rocket ship, as your wife would probably call it now, if we could get that label in there, we'll hope. But now you're looking and developing, which I want to take some time to talk about, something that is more applicable to consumers in every household in America. And I think it touches on 2 points. One, I think one of the things that would be a very risky proposition would be to try and get veterinarians to take the time to communicate about new products and services to their clientele, because the veterinarians I'm exposed to are so busy and so overworked that it's more treat 'em and street 'em than it is having the time that the veterinarians did on our farm 15 years ago to actually have a cup of coffee after the herd check and have a conversation. I mean, they do their thing, and they're gone. And it's not because they're rude or impersonal. It's that they are so overworked and so under-resourced. So I think that's a challenge for the animal health space moving forward, especially when we're using veterinarians to educate the farmer or the producer. But Dr. Rick, let's talk about that veterinary shortage and the new innovation you're approaching to address that. Not so much on the agricultural or production animal side, but more in the companion animal side.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's estimated that the shortage right now is about 15,000 veterinarians, right, in the United States. So, but I was watching a presentation the other day, and got a little education for myself there too, and it was really that is true. These guys were talking about the fact that the shortage isn't even the biggest problem we have. And even if the schools were suddenly to crank out those 15,000 vets next year, we would still have a big problem. And that is, we're not productive. We're not as productive as we used to be. And, I'll go ahead and pat myself on the back, but I was probably an idiot, right? We just grew up that way that, you're going to have to work 80 or 100 hours, and that's just how it's going to be. You're not hiring vets anymore that will do that. And even in livestock, even in rural veterinarians, they're choosing lifestyle. And, and maybe they should. Maybe we were all foolish. I don't know. I mean, if you end up looking like me if you work 80 hours a week. So I don't blame them.
Well, Dr. Rick, for someone who's only 39 years old, I will say that you've been ridden hard, I would say, for those 39 years, right?
It's hard to look like a baseball glove that's been left out in the back porch for 4 years. So, yeah. No, but these vets, you're right. They're coming out of school. They want higher wages.
Sure.
They want to work less than 40 hours a week. They don't want to do emergency on call. They don't want to work weekends. And and I'm not even picking on them again, right? It
Sure.
maybe that they're smarter for actually having a life, and that's great. However, now somebody has to own this veterinary practice, and that's a business, right? And the business has to make money, and I can only charge so much. Now we're really in a pinch on the livestock side of things because the cow is only worth so much.
Sure.
And, on the beef side, even more so, she may be worth this much this year. Next year, don't even think about charging me that because I can't afford to pay it. We're better off to go some other direction. So, and as you work through, now the horses, they're worth a little bit more to me, but you get to companion animals and yes, they're worth quite a bit, but folks don't have an unlimited amount of cash resources to take care of them. So that's our problem, right? And so these veterinarians have to find ways to be more productive with their practices because hiring more vets is not the solution. And it's interesting, here in Colorado, and I'm not even saying I'm a fan of it, and I'll come right out and say I voted against it. But this proposition, I think it was 129 or something, and it got approved by the voters. But, now they're going to essentially allow physician assistant type of roles in veterinary medicine. And so it'll be this mid-level practitioner. And that will, of course, the push behind it was that'll make it cheaper for you to go to the vet. Well, no, it won't. The person that owns the practice, and now a lot of them are corporate.
Sure.
They still have to have a profitable business. But now they can pay that person a little bit less. That's true.
Sure.
And maybe they can crank a few more cases through their clinic. So somehow in this whole story, we have to find more productivity. And so that segues into a lot of what we're trying to do with Data Ag in developing Animal Tech Talk, for example, is a large language model built and designed to speak with you about your pet at a veterinary level. We really tried to take the training wheels off this thing, and it, it's scary, but we're there. And society is there right now to trust. I don't want to say trust information. None of us know what to trust there, but I can at least trust in the fact that if this model has read every journal, every textbook, every case study from every location around the world of how veterinarians have handled this problem, that thing is smarter than Dr. Dumm.
Sure.
Every day, all day. So, and I've got, I could think of one or two colleagues that would say, no, it's never smarter than me. But the rest of us probably would acknowledge that, okay, so here's some technology that we need to adopt, right? And if it can help, and the veterinarians that I speak with, if you can handle all of the questions that I have to answer all day long that I can't charge the person for anyway.
Sure.
And help them be smarter, help them be more comfortable with being a pet parent. And not even on the, pet side necessarily, but even look at cattle, can I have the confidence to go down there and get an idea of what's going on with my herd without waiting 3 days for a veterinarian to get me onto their schedule to come out? And I don't have a very good chute, and my rope broke last time we tried to use it with the tractor. I mean,
sure,
technology can step in here and do a lot. Now, it can't put its hands on an animal. It can't write a prescription. It can't do surgery, right? I mean, so veterinarians are not afraid of that upending their livelihood. I think it's the type of assistance that we need in the industry, and it makes people more productive. Then now I know I need to go there,
sure,
because they've already asked 17 questions. Oh, and by the way, when I show up, it can give me that case report of what's this guy been talking about for a week, and I can get it in a very succinct case brief, and I know exactly what I got to deal with when I get to this guy's farm, or when that dog or cat does come into my clinic. I've got it all. So we're excited about that, and I think when we talk about the veterinary shortage and we talk about the rising costs of veterinary care, it's scary. And you combine that with the fact that so many people a lot of people are choosing to have a pet in lieu of children. So these are their children, right? But it's got to be. We have to do everything we can to make that affordable, because you want people to be able to take care of them as best they can.
This podcast is brought to you by 50 Marketing, your partner in navigating the unique challenges of animal health and the agribusiness industry. We specialize in creating tailored marketing strategies that resonate with your audience and drive results. Whether you need strategic planning, branding, website development, content creation, or video production, our team understands your industry's landscape and is here to help you thrive. Visit us at 50marketing.com today to learn more. What I think when you look at the efficiency that you're driving, to be able to, in the palm of your hand in these smartphones, to be able to interact with this large, this language model that can provide feedback and kind of narrow down what's going on, so that then when we are communicating with the veterinarian, it's succinct, it's as accurate as it can be from an owner standpoint, right? They certainly don't have medical training, they don't have the tools, etc., the diagnostics, but at least narrow it down. It seems to me that we could create tremendous efficiency and maybe deal with some of that gap that's caused with the napkin math of 15,000 vets. But then when we actually probably do the hours needed, there's a whole other figure there because of the productivity loss. And I agree with you. I think when you look at generations gone by, young people who are graduating from university right now, no matter what position they're going into, they're getting jobs for 30, like they get a job that right out of college that says you only have to work 37 hours a week. To me, that's laughable, because I was excited that I didn't have to go into consulting when I came out. So I was planning on 65 to 70 hours a week instead of like going to work for one of the big consulting agencies that they told you were going to work 80 to 95 hours a week. That's what it was for 2 or 3 years. So, but that world is over. And I don't think it's ever coming back. No, and whether it's in the veterinarian space, business consulting, I think even the hospitals are starting to struggle with that, because they can't get these interns to work 200 hours a week or whatever the crazy math is and live at the hospital and do that. So, well, when you think about this pivot in your career, right? Moving from more of that direct to farm in the animal community, you're now on the face and like right on the horizon of dealing with a direct to consumer product. And how does, or service, however you want to look at it. So how do you feel like in your strategy, you're kind of approaching that marketing space differently?
It's it's really an interesting challenge. And, when you got gray hair, right, that's your indicator that you're not the best guy to figure out your own marketing plan anymore, because
Love it.
We didn't grow up with these apps. We didn't grow up doing that stuff. It just didn't exist. And thank God, right? I'd have never got married if all a girl had to do was swipe her finger to, he's off the list, It's just, it's a whole different world. And so here we go. And you really have to avail yourself to people that understand how social media works. What does it take? And the attention span, of course, right, is gone. So we used to think, let's put an ad out, or let's put an article out, and let's try to get them to read the first paragraph, or let's have them look at an ad, and, we got their attention for 5 or 6 seconds. You got about 1 and maybe even less than a second now.
Sure.
And I'm not even exaggerating. I mean, that's literally what it is. And if you don't grab their attention somehow, some way within that second, they're on to the next thing.
Yes.
And that's almost all of the platforms. And so, yeah, that's our challenge now. So it's a whole new set of challenges. You for a guy like me, but you just have to avail yourself to people that are in that world and can figure it out. It is interesting, and I like it. These influencers, right?
Sure.
What a crazy concept or notion. We had influencers growing up, right? We had old Mr. Kirsch that lived over there that seemed to know everything. And, he didn't have a degree in anything, but
sure.
I don't know. What does Mr. Kirsch think? Well, go ask him, but it's so wild to think now that these people that are out there and have built up a little bit of a following, and some of them are quite intelligent and good at what they do.
Sure.
Some they're not, right? I mean, they have no intellect but for whatever reason, they have the right look, or they have the dog that they make fun of or whatever. And now they're an influencer, or even their dog is an influencer, right? We have animals that are influencers. So it's all quite insane. However, it's where we are, and that it's not going to go away. And so learning how to play in that field. But I want to embrace it because I do think it's interesting that people are talking to each other and sharing experiences and learning from each other in ways that we never had available to us. And, I equate a lot of this to, like Animal Tech Talk that we're working on. When we all started having babies 25, 30 years ago, everybody went out and bought the book, what to do, what to expect when you're expecting. Because nobody, we had already kicked grandma out of the households, right? Because that used to be everybody's book. She was the influencer. That's why you let your grandma live with you until she was gone, right? And now we had to buy books, and now it's switching to influencers and apps. And
yes.
So I think it's cool. It's scary, and it can be difficult to understand, but we're learning. So,
well, no, and I think definitely for Animal Tech Talk in that app, the path is it's TikTok, it's influencers, it's right on the edge of D2C, right? I would be shocked if there were many techniques that worked historically in animal health. In that Hordes Dairyman article that is like, TLDR, too long, didn't read. I mean, it would take a minute and a half, 2 minutes to just get the gist of the thesis statement and the features and benefits. That's all gone. That's ancient history. It's right out on the edge. So I think that's exciting. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Dr. Rick, do you want to talk at all about beyond the Animal Tech Talk and kind of that interface with health conversation? Do you want to take any time and talk about the facial recognition and using AI to identify animals? Do you want to talk about that innovation that you're working on?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we face as an industry in ag, especially, but there's applications everywhere. But biosecurity across the globe is huge, right? That's going to be one of our biggest challenges up and coming. And knock on wood, we're so lucky to have dodged some bullets here in the last couple of decades in this country with diseases that have wiped out entire industries in entire countries around the world. And, we're experiencing that a little bit right now with HPAI, with bird flu.
Yes, the egg crisis, right?
And people are, I hope they recognize the eggs are expensive because there's no eggs because they killed all the birds, right?
100 million. I heard 100 million birds.
That was
they killed,
right? And I don't even. It's not that I disagree with it or anything. That's what they had to do because you can't have a diseased flock, right? It's
Yep.
It's even if some of them would have survived, they don't come back to productivity. They don't, right? So it's anyway, as that transferred into dairy cattle, we got a good taste of it in the dairy industry of, okay, well, how bad is this going to affect cattle?
Sure.
Fortunately, it's not killing cows, but it does knock down milk production. And it does create some problems. But anyway, I think biosecurity is going to continue to be one of our biggest challenges on the horizon. And, we trade our beef and dairy and pork and poultry products all around the world. And those products are coming here too. Well, we still don't have a very good way of identifying animals.
Sure.
And really tracking them. And so facial recognition will be that. I mean, right now, the closest technology we have with any chance of working a little bit is RFID, the microchips. But that's a 45-year-old technology.
Sure.
So and we've been able to prove with horses that we can do facial recognition, and that's been a really cool project to work on. And so we literally can go out and with a 1.5 second video recognize who these horses are. And I went out and tested it actually, out by Meeker with the wild horses that are out there. And, there's a fantastic example of a technology, right? And how do we use it? These are, they all look like they were 30, but they're probably 60-ish year old women, that are literally volunteers, and they go out and they try to identify all of these wild horses, and they spend hours in the field and they take a gazillion pictures and they learn the horses. How do you pass that on to the next person? Because they need to know who the horse is, though. When that mare comes in to drink at the water trough that the BLM has put out there, they dart her with some contraceptive to prevent her from getting pregnant. Well, we can't dart the same horse every week. But by the time they figure out which horse it is or agree on it, and they're down in a blind, it's like, so we went out and took this technology out, and we're taking pictures of horses from 100 yards away with a cell phone. Well, that's Shadowland, isn't it? That is Shadowland. How do you know that? Well, let's get this one, right? Because they had already given me their pictures, and they said, okay, we know who these horses are, and we train the computer, right? Well, computer trains itself, it's really cool technology. So now we take that and extrapolate that into knowing the cattle, knowing the pigs. There's a big opportunity there to solve an enormous problem for our country, and to give us all, frankly, just a little more confidence in food safety and the whole system. And, we could sit here and talk about dozens of applications for that technology. For the horses, we're using it as an event management tool, so that, hey, I'm going to come to this event this weekend or in a couple of weeks. I'm going to just register for that. And okay, I'm taking Chubb and Hambone down to that roping, and boom, they've got my paperwork. It can all be checked in advance. And when I show up, they take a snapshot of Chubb and Hambone, and they're verified. And there's no question about it. And now, next week, when they realize, oh gosh, one of the horses at that event had West Nile virus, boom, with a click of a button, they can tell everybody. And they know, what other events have you been to now? And pretty soon the spider web becomes manageable. Right now, it's really tough. We get these cases of BSE and other stuff, and it's, my hat's off to these veterinarians that track that stuff down, because that can't be easy.
It's a lot of work.
Oh, it's it's really tough. So I'm super excited about what we can do with that. And of course, pet owners out there, you know, about 8 to 10% of pets are microchipped.
Sure.
And about 45% of those actually completed the registration, so that if their animal does get found, they know who to come in contact and say, "Hey, we found your dog." But a guy's got to have the scanner. So your pet has to be found by somebody that doesn't just decide, "Well, I just got a new dog, he's cool."
Sure.
But he takes him to a vet clinic, or he takes it to a shelter that has a scanner that can scan the chip, and the registration was done. And then hopefully everybody gets reunited and it's a happy story. But with facial recognition, you have a scanner in your back pocket.
Sure.
Everybody does. So when that cat comes in your yard, you don't have to try to catch it. If it's missing and it's been reported missing, take a picture of it, and it's going to put the two together, right? And we'll figure it out. So it's super cool. All the stuff we're working with now and these large language models. It's really been a lot of fun and an interesting segue away from, I've been working with widgets all my life, physical implements that you go and market, and this will really help you do your job. And so to get into this type of technology, it's a lot of fun, and I suspect it's going to also be fulfilling and rewarding here ultimately.
Well, Dr. Rick, I think one of the things I hear with this, facial recognition is the chip was the solution that wasn't true. Because if you have an adoption of, like you're saying, less than 4%, right, of actual use and utility in the market, the chipping works as long as you have 100% adoption and you have scanners everywhere and that type of, right. That's never going to happen because the cost, I don't even know if anybody's figured it out, would be astronomical and unworkable. So here we're taking, the problem remains the same. The solution that was proposed and implemented was not a solution because it didn't work and it wasn't adopted. Here we have a solution that we're leveraging tools that are available to everyone. Right. My children have phones, for kindness sake, everybody on the planet pretty much has a phone with a camera. So this development, I think, is just so right for the age, right, and is really going to have massive impact. Well, Dr. Rick, I find these subjects completely fascinating. I grew up on a farm. I still own a farm. I dabble in agriculture, certainly not at the scale of some of these farms that you've represented over time, but I still enjoy participating as a hobby. And thinking about the convergence of animal health, agriculture, pet ownership, and technology is just, I could listen to you talk about these things and some of these applications all day. I just find it fascinating.
Well, it's fun to learn. Sure.
Yeah. And it's neat to learn about these things. And then I look at it from my perspective, which is, okay, how do we take these things to market? How do we make sure that there's quicker adoption? Because like you said before, you can't spend $4 million to get it to market if the total revenue opportunity is 3.5. Because then your wife, the CFO, is talking to you and saying, tapping you on the shoulder, like, let's have a little gut check, right? I've been there.
She's swiping left.
Yes.
Or right. I don't know which it is, but
yeah, I know.
You're gone.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we love to do here, Dr. Rick, is we love shameless plugs. So we would like you to tell us, and we'll have all of this connected to everywhere we post this, social media, YouTube, everywhere, your contact digits, and all of those things will be available. But just maybe tell us a little bit about your companies, where they can get a hold of you, and if anybody's interested in talking further about these topics, how they can reach you.
Well, great. I appreciate that opportunity to do that. Data Ag Inc. is our parent company. We spelt it like a hillbilly would, I guess. It's DATAG. So, we didn't want to put that extra A in there and just.
I love that.
So Data Ag Inc. equid.com but equid.com, EQUID is the horse facial recognition technology, but all of that can be found at the Data Ag website. But no, we welcome any and all conversations about applications, about folks in the industry that would like to pursue, hey, gosh, wouldn't that also do this for us? Let's talk about it. And we're really enjoying this because there's not a conversation we have. They never stay on track. We're always, oh, what about this? And so it's so much fun. And to be completely shameless, if you're interested in investing and being part of what we do, please feel free to reach out, and contact information is there on the website. And my email is just rick@dataaginc.com. But you don't even have to call me doctor. I'll take your call. So,
well, yeah. And I've enjoyed, so you and I have had other conversations on other channels with other people about some of these projects. And I've absolutely enjoyed the conversations and what we've been trying to accomplish. And certainly I agree with you. Whenever we get into these rooms and we're having these conversations, we start down one path, and before you know it, there's these other. So I think the reality is the opportunities here are really infinite. And that's the promise of this next technological revolution. Right. And it's finding ways and addressing real problems. And I think certainly when we think about veterinary shortages, when we think about biosecurity, when we think about information and knowledge being transferred and be able to deal with information that will not be available if it isn't cataloged properly. There are a lot of ways that we can see this convergence of technology and the animal health and agricultural space, and even for pet owners, come together and see real, true innovation that's going to have lasting impact. So it's an exciting space to be in.
No, absolutely. No, I agree. And the way people want to digest information, the way they want to have access to it now has changed dramatically. And the way that they want products delivered to them now, right? Our farm's no different than our home now, to where
Sure.
if I need a vaccine because I'm working calves tomorrow, I'd kind of like it to be here by tomorrow morning.
Yes.
And so we have this new expectation. So there's a lot of changes coming, even in the ag sector, that are, we all need to be ready for, and AI is going to be a big part of that. So it's very interesting and rewarding to be in this new space now. Not that I miss, being shoulder deep in the back end of a cow for a living. I mean, that was also glorious. So I'm just saying this might be better.
So the funny thing about this conversation up to this point is that most everybody who listens would understand, like who isn't from the ag space, would understand a lot of what we talked about, or generally. This part, we're going to go completely off the rails. I always found the consistent dad joke or bad joke that is always occurring during preg checks is the, I broke the seal. Right, because as soon as you start into that, the gas that comes out that the environmentalists were after, right, the methane that just pours out of the cow, and then every vet in my lifetime has always been like, "Yeah, I broke the seal," and then anyway, no, that's good stuff. When I think that also speaks though to, I mean, even as we embrace technology, those of us who love agriculture and love animals, we always still love to deal with those animals where they exist. There is no technological innovation that is going to replace us growing animals for food and growing crops. There's nothing. So we have to deal with that. That's part of our future, and we have to innovate. And but yeah, when you think about coming from small farms in Pennsylvania to where you've gone, there's still that element that we have to deal with, that at some days we're shoulder deep in a cow's behind, and playing with all that. I love it. Real quick, personal story. I was going to pursue veterinary medicine. Grew up our vet had to deal with a number of twisted gut in our herd. And I assisted on several surgeries when I was a kid, just knee high. And I was in love with it, But then I met chemistry. Chemistry and we dated. But ultimately chemistry swiped the negative direction on the app. And at the same time, coincidentally, my dad was an entrepreneur and a business owner. And then I ultimately fell more in love with pursuing that space and following him because he was my hero, still is, and pursuing that. But well, Dr. Rick, love this conversation. Definitely, as a personal favor, when you're back in town visiting the family, we have to get together and have some lunch or breakfast or whatever. Looking forward to that because us Pennsylvanians got to stick together.
That's right.
But no, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to run this back again because I'm going to want to get an update here 6 months, a year to see how much progress and how far this app and everything is going in your business.
That sounds great. I look forward to it. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining the Missing Half podcast, where we're discovering what's missing in manufacturing, B2B, animal health, and agricultural marketing. Like, share, subscribe. Have a great day.